Hello again, and welcome to another session of the 18th Annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Conference. I'm Bob Hales, I'm your moderator. We have with us Tennille Feldbush, who's an assistant English professor at Grand Canyon University. And she lives in Arizona, where she enjoys hiking like a zillion other people who live in Arizona. Um, She's going to talk about strategies for online college faculty as psychological support agents. So, Tennille, tell me all about this.
All right. Well, a while back last year, Rick and Katie Sprout uh, solicited chapter ideas for a peer-reviewed book calling Exploring Student Psychology in Online Higher Education. And I thought, why not? I noticed changes in students, the last 10 years. So I'd like to, you know, explore that and add a chapter. Even though I'm an English professor, I have a lot of teaching experience. So I went ahead and joined their project. So my chapter is called Strategies for Online College Faculty as Psychological Support Agents. So take a moment, Bob and anybody else who pops in. Maybe in chat, or if you want to talk aloud, that's fine too. Any learning theories that you've researched or remembered from your college days, or a memorable comment maybe that a teacher made to you throughout your whole educational career? What has really stuck with you when you think about methods for learning and for support from educators?
That's a good one. Well, okay, so I never really taught other than some workshops. Um, Memorable comment. Um, well, I've had teachers just give some positive feedback that, really felt good. If I turned in a good paper and saying, hey, you really, nailed it on the head with that. That really felt good. For me, positive reinforcement always worked better than negative. Negative works well for some, I guess, but um, yeah, that's about the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, for sure. Positivity is definitely one of the topics that we'll talk about today. I think that everyone tends to remember, the most positive comments that they receive from teachers, and they remember that teacher. Sometimes challenging comments with love or with empathy or support can also be very memorable. Some learning theories that I'm sure people have researched. They're maybe not as memorable because they're not as personal. You know, you stick with the stories rather than maybe the theories. So that's totally understandable, especially if your subject matter is, let's say, engineering or something. Maybe you haven't focused as much on the teaching aspects and the theories, but you do it every day. You work with students to help them in your subject matter, no matter what teaching theory classes you've had or research that projects that you worked in. Everyone has something to contribute um, because they have different experiences with students and have had successes with teaching and maybe some not so successful teaching moments that have stuck with them. throughout their experiences. So we all have something to contribute. We can all learn from our not only educational experiences, but our professional teaching experiences and also our personal experiences in education to help us support students.
Yeah, we'll add one thing.
Oh, yeah, go
Talking
for
about
it.
positivity. My master's happens to be in counseling, and the one course in particular has really stuck with me. It was a whole course on encouragement, all of the different ways you can encourage people to be better, do better, whatever. And that I don't know. That stuck with me. That's how I uh, worked with my staff in the past, trying to be encouraging of them rather than negative, and try to turn a bad situation into a learning experience, something positive.
Definitely. You catch more bees with honey, right? Than with vinegar. It's one of those old things. Well, I do remember some learning and teaching theories because I did an MIT before my MFA and because I've focused a lot on teaching academically with writing. So a couple that really stood out to me were the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and also scaffolding, which is teaching incrementally to through concepts and procedure and through strategic methods. Those really kind of stuck with me through my experiences, and they're things that I use often. Um, I also remember that, when I was in school, I got a lot of kudos for poetry, for writing poetry, creative writing, that sort of thing. So I remember a lot of that, and for a long time, I would write poetry, and then when I became more of an academic writer and was in the, teaching college level, I realized that one of the comments that perhaps spurred that was actually a constructive comment made by my college advisor in one of those one-on-one meetings. And he said something like, I try to be a scholar. And I could tell that he was kind of saying that I wasn't quite there yet as a freshman. Was not quite yet a scholar. And truthfully, I didn't even know what the term meant as an undergraduate freshman because my parents were blue collar workers, probably. I had no idea, like my vocabulary was not so great. But I've definitely had more success vocationally as a scholar or an academic through teaching and publishing than I have as a poet, which I, do occasionally, but it's interesting how sometimes a comment that will make you think, whether it's positive or constructive, will stick with you and motivate you in the long run, even if during the time that it's said you don't even understand it, or you think it might be a little constructive or criticism, it'll stick with you. And those lessons that you learn over the long run, um, I think really motivate more because you have to figure it out. What did they mean? You have to look something up yourself, or you have to kind of reflect back on it, and it can make the most difference. So faculty obviously can offer students psychological and academic support both. It just might take some time for students to recognize the value of it. So here's some more ideas. If you wanted to, let's say, do some more research into learning theory, as a researcher, scholar, and practitioner, you can look more into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, belonging and safety, community of inquiry, social constructivism, self-determination. These are things that I've seen a lot in research, and these lead to ideas for professional development and for reflecting on your experiences and reflecting on your resources and your teaching methods. Maybe also some peer collaboration ideas that you can have for both curriculum and teaching methods, and also maybe research or other services as an academic scholar. You can also do what a lot of academics like to do, which is to make a learning framework or even an acronym with all of this research and experience that you have. So for my chapter, that's exactly what I did, thinking about how we can synthesize academic and psychological support. This is kind of the acronym that I came up with. Number one is anxiety aware. Two is growth mindset mentors. Three is emotionally intelligent engagers. Four is nuanced scaffolders. And five is thoughtful advocates. So, in your journey, you can, of course, think about your experiences, your memories, your successes and challenges in teaching, any research or classwork that you've done. You could, if you wanted to, create your own acronym and framework to help remind you, hey, you do have experience that is beneficial for your students, whether that's personal, professional, academic, research, or reflective. Anxiety aware. So we are in a post-COVID-19 learning environment, and what I've read shows that mental health, anxiety has risen dramatically over the last, 5 or 10 years during this switch to more online experiences, and also some of the challenges that came with the lockdown and some of I know the mental health and the social difficulties that brought. Um, I also teach English comp, which some students come in with some negative experiences about, maybe a grammar Nazi teacher that they had, or just all those red marks that English teachers like to put on papers and overwhelm students with. Obviously, there are diversity of perspectives and needs and experiences that students have. For online English Comp 1, they're all different ages. They have different socioeconomic situations, generational readiness, college readiness. They could have a disability with an accommodation. They obviously have stress. Most of them have family and employment responsibilities. Um, so they come in with all of this unique experience and needs, and a certain amount of expectations for the course, um, and also a psychological capital, which is, how much they can deal with. Maybe school is just maybe fourth or fifth on their list of responsibilities, and they can't invest a whole lot of psychological capital in it, let alone time and resources. So instructors can be aware of, the unique needs students have and be open to learning from it, and realize that there are accommodations from the university, but we can also give reassurance and experiences that are social and personal to include a wide variety of students to help them feel like they belong in the class, like the teacher is approachable, that they can complete the class no matter what their background is. And my twin sister teaches math and music, and I'm not sure how she does that because students come in with more anxiety about math, I think, than pretty much any subject, I'm sure. So, how can we apply this anxiety awareness in our classes? Obviously, we've hinted at building an inclusive experience. We can rely on some teaching theory training. For instance, flipped classroom is another uh, idea that's big in the research area right now. Social teaching and cognitive presence methods uh, are also great tools to create a student-centered environment where students feel like they can ask questions, where they can feel involved in the class and the materials, where they feel like, oh, okay, I can share my struggles with this subject matter and get help. I don't need to be silent. I don't need to just listen to the teacher lecture. And of course, the more you kind of look into flipped classroom, the more you'll give students a lot of choices, technology wise, media wise, different levels, higher and lower levels. You'll look into the technology and what is interesting to your students and also yourself, because if you're interested in it, then that will show. So here's some more applications. Specifically, I think class welcomes and intros really help. This is something that maybe beginning instructors might not think is important, but it definitely is. You want to have a welcome to class or maybe multiples, maybe a video or a post or both, maybe an email, messages. You could even have a place for shared experiences or stories like what's your experience with English previously. One thing that has worked well is collecting former student advice. I've noticed that really helps students feel like that completing the class is possible because other people have done it because they can see, oh, this student was successful and this is their their experience as a student, so I can be successful too. Also, praise and prescription, that old sandwich method, having some of both positive but also prescriptive so they know what they can work on and that, you know, they are invested in their learning experience. So some terms that you can use are unity, we, make it about us as a class rather than teacher versus student. You can have more choice, more activities, more reflection. Like I said, different technologies. You can look at best practices that other teachers have done. So here are a couple example posts where I have some, phrasing that is positive and unified and helps students reflect on what they can do to be part of the learning environment. I also email students before the class starts, and that kind of helps some students who are maybe anxious about English to look ahead a little bit and realize, okay, this is doable. I can succeed. Number two is growth mindset mentors. And you'll see in a lot of these there's some overlap, and that's fine. If you create your own acronym, you see, oh, these things kind of overlap, and that's totally fine. Um, Self-compassion is good. You can have when students share their struggles, you know, other students will respond and say, yeah, I've struggled with that too. And that helps build self-compassion. Students realize, oh, well, I'm not the only one. Empathy, rapport, make things social experiences, but also individualized, timely, and objective. Grading should be logical, clear, and coaching based. One thing that's really helped me is to start with 100% when I grade so that I have the expectation that the student's going to do well. And then I'll mark down and explain any deductions that they have so that I'm not starting with a curve or a negative mindset about, oh, the student's not going to get it. I start with more positive mentality. So here are some examples again. The top one is a response to a thesis in a paper. I tell them, great, you got it. But I also let them know that they need to use third person voice. So having positive feedback is great, but also you want some constructive and helpful feedback that's going to actually engage them and improve them. And you can have resources. You can also share your struggles. I got CS marks on my papers in college. I had no idea what that was until I looked it up. And I told them like, I had to look it up. So I am great at finding comma errors now because I had to look it up. So you can share with your students how you've grown, and that sets a model for growth mindset. Number three, emotionally intelligent engagers. Have a flipped classroom again, consider students' perspectives. For example, I have a poll on my Padlet about which resource they think might be the most helpful. And for them, it was the remind.com where they get reminders about what's due, what's coming, which was surprising to me. I thought my Padlet, because it's so pretty, has so many things, would be the most helpful. Um, Also, again, class intros, weekly videos, quotes, and stories. I was surprised that like I got more responses when I just put the weekly video by itself without any text around it because they had to figure it out. What is this video and hit play, um, rather than me trying to explain what it is amongst other activities and posts. So sometimes playing around with order and presentation help a lot. So, uh, Bob and anybody else, what has surprised you about your students' needs or preferences or anything else about teaching that maybe you've learned? Anybody have any ideas? I know I overwhelm students sometimes. You could tell I'm an English instructor. I have a lot of text. I can't help it. So you can think about what surprised you, what uh, their preferences are not ours, you know.
I'll add one thing. Again, talking about engineering, it was common for a number of students really not to show up in class. They'd
Hmm.
just read the book and they'd show up on test day and did pretty good. And, the instructors, on the other hand, had instructors that, had a rule. You had to attend class, had to, whether you wanted to or not, regardless whether you found it useful, they wanted a full classroom. And, again, that was something a faculty member wanted. It wasn't what some of the students wanted. For me, it would be, hey, if you can learn standing on your head, I don't care. Whatever works for you, that's the point. And some instructors, no, they wanted you there so they'd have an audience.
Yeah, and that'll definitely apply when we talk about some emotional regulation later, because we're humans, we have feelings. We don't want to spend all this time on a lecture or participation activities and nobody's there. But sometimes we have to learn to kind of adjust our mindsets or expectations as well. And allow students some more freedom. They are mostly adults, there are some dual enrollment occasionally, but they appreciate choices and autonomy on some things. So that's a good point. Like, I'm glad I'm not necessarily a perfectionist. So that helps a lot because I always see multiple sides of everything. It's sometimes hard to make a decision because I'm not a perfectionist. On most things, I just, want to have that experience. So that's helped me be maybe more flexible. In my terminal degree is creative writing, so that helps too. I'm not necessarily the traditional English teacher as well, so that helps too. So good. Hear more ideas, peer support, reflection, advice, gratitude, study buddies. Um, I know a lot of people teaching online are introverts, but not all the students online are. They might want to reach out to other students, and that's great to have that option. Faculty as emotional mentor, kind of what you were talking about, Bob, to just realize that students have different preferences and different needs, and how we've planned our lesson or our class um, might have some success, but students might deviate from that and still have success. You can also use positivity, school spirit, connection. I have some posts here, like the one on the right, where there's a thunder boop. That's our mascot. It's just something fun. And some students will like fun, and some will think, well, this is college, is supposed to be serious. But it's good to have a little bit of fun, I think, too. You can teach empathy too. You can show, student examples of discussion, replies, just about everything, and help students realize, like, is this proper behavior? Is this a proper assignment submission? That's, as long as you don't include the student names and things like that.
When
Um,
talking about school spirit, I once had an accounting professor teaching in a 3 4 hour course on Saturday mornings,
oh
starting at
wow.
8 a.m. I mean, that's tough, accounting at 8 a.m. on a weekend. But he wanted to do things to keep students energized. And one of the things we did, we got our cheerleaders to do their routine to the school fight song, and we recorded it. And so the
Wow.
first thing every Saturday morning, he played that, a video, and the students sang along with it, and it was a way to get the blood going. And he
Pep
did
rally.
smaller chunks of information before maybe just standing up and, I don't know, exercising for a minute, but something to keep it going and keep the students focused and so forth. And
That's great.
that that was about the
Songs
only way to
songs are
make accounting
wonderful in
interesting
education.
on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, anything positive, music, quotes, former student advice, anything like that, can help perk up students. A lot of students like memes. Again, some of them think it's kind of beyond college level, but I think memes are great. Study buddies is another example I have here. And I have had students take me up on study buddies, like they'll get the other student's email. So that's great too. Like anything that can make the class memorable, but also interactive and student focused is great. So of course we have to talk about the academic side. So this is why I kind of wrote the acronym back to scaffolding, one of my most memorable teaching theories that I learned a long time ago. Um, and it helps me too, because sometimes I just want to learn something right away. I don't have patience, but that's not the way learning works for most things. So there are three types: procedural, conceptual, and strategic. And these are like the foundation if you want to be a nuanced nuanced scaffolder if you want to make sure your students are learning, that you can appeal to multiple levels. You can break down the content, the procedures of the class, and you can also be strategic about it per student so that students' goals, um, academic goals are addressed too. They don't all need the same help throughout the class. Like you said, Bob, some students can just kind of do it on their own. And I've had a lot of students who just do it on their own. They just never ask me a question, but they're able to do the class. And some of them ask a lot of questions. So everybody's a little different. So sometimes you have to be strategic per situation and student. So this is kind of ugly. I'm not like a designer, but here's an example of procedural scaffolding. I've taken Canva and made a flow chart. It's a little wordy again. I'm an English instructor. Um, but I've broken down the large tasks in a class through flow charts, but then I also take each step for an announcement and also some discussion activities or participation activities too. So you can see first for the rhetorical analysis essay, they have to choose a topic piece. So they need to know that, like, find the topic pieces. Here's where here's where you get it. This is procedural. You got to know how to find what you need to do the assignment. And then for step two, you need to research. You need to know the vocabulary in order to do the assignment. You need to know the ethos, pathos, logos, appeals. And you also need support for your essay. You can't just, write your own definitions. There are academic definitions if you want to use definitions for those. And then, of course, I had to have a meme somewhere. Lord of the Rings. Here's conceptual scaffolding, an example um, where I help students realize that for the first two projects, they were a little easier. And this last one, they have been building up to it. The op-ed is more of an argument, a debate, some actual, they have to do a lot more claim construction than the first two assignments because they have a lot more choice. So you can compare and contrast what they've already done to what they will do so that they know that they're ready and they're ready for a new project because they have the skills from the other projects. So you can let them know, let them be metacognitive to realize that they're ready, but also give them support. So student focus, you can have them reflect, the beginning of the class, after every essay or project, what are you hoping to learn? What did you learn? What are you going to do to complete this assignment or this class? What might you need? And here are some resources, by the way, if you do need them. And also have, advice from former students. I didn't include that here, but I do post those sometimes. And you can think about ways of saving these kind of posts and announcements too, so that you can be strategic, so you can be prescriptive. So you might not use every resource for every class and every student. Four is nuance scaffolding still. You want to be interactive, multimodal. So one way that I save my resources is in a Padlet, and you can put it right in your shell, your platform. You don't have to make a website or a Padlet, but that's just one option. And you can tell that I take them through the whole process of the paper again. This is what a rhetorical analysis is, and here are the steps and the pieces that you need to do it so that you can differentiate instruction and allow students to find what they need and also prescribed to them in certain situations. So sounds like you might want a sample source or sample paper to look at, and you have that available in your collection, wherever that is. Here's some more. You can, again, take apart the activity to the basics. I have a vocabulary scaffold on the left about, the three appeals. Here's a quiz. Reflect on it. What did you get right? What are you still working on? You can also, at the end of a unit, have them reflect upon what they did, and then also look ahead to the next project and reflect upon that, how they're similar or different. You can also have a preview of the class that probably they'll take next. So for me, that's English 106. The last is thoughtful advocates. It's just kind of pulling it all together, the holistic approach, differentiated interventions. You can also have reminders and repetition because students really like that, especially the lower and mid-level students. Advocacy and resources for community and university, as well as, personal needs for the class, for their academic needs. Have missing student contact, maybe email or text or remind or whatever software that you use. Higher and lower level students considerations. Also colleague collaborations. Perhaps there are some resources your university or your colleagues have that you can add to your list. So here's some example reminders and repetition tools. I use TextBlaze, that's a text expander. I've used Typed In before, similar kind of thing, to kind of save you time so that you can be prescriptive because you have everything at your fingertips. You just type in a code and it can give the student that resource. Remind is a reminder tool that's automatic. You just set it up like announcements, obviously email, and then of course your class platform messages, discussions, and that kind of thing. So think about how you can layer the most important things, but also have at your access the things that individuals might need who maybe need more help or more challenge. So here are some examples, feedback, finished rough draft feedback announcement. I like to let them know when I've done the rough draft feedback and how they can use it. And also the first week on Friday, I'll let them know, hey, if you haven't participated, here's how you participate. You can also have saved resources for different situations like community needs. Students could be homeless, they could be having mental health, family, all sorts of issues. So you could save responses and resources for that and use that prescriptively. And here's an example of a positive response to a student in discussion, that green thesis comment. Um, when a student does something well in the discussion, you can point it out and say, you've done a great job, and then you can refer other students to it by having them look at it so that they know what a successful piece for a concept it would look like. And then have them reflect on it so that the higher and lower level students can say, oh yeah, I recognize how a great thesis would be for this particular paper, but also how I've used it in the past or can use it in the future. You can also think about what your university and community does to help students, and you can advertise that. Maybe there is an accommodation disability office that you can refer students to. Maybe you can refer them to their counselor, tech support, just anything that will help them out. You can have at your fingertips to just share, or you can also make an announcement with this kind of community resources. You can, have in your sites different things that maybe your colleagues are doing. Maybe they're doing clubs or mentorships or activities on campus or online, and you can share that as well. I know that GCU is doing a character education series right now that's really big. So when I get those, I advertise it like students, you can, be involved in the university even though you're online. Health and wellness is also another option. Student success, there's probably a student success center or something to help students, tutoring. There are just so many resources that you can have in your repertoire of helpful feedback to help students be successful, not only academically, but in lifelong success and complete their college undergraduate degree and beyond. And they're very, very thankful when I do give them those resources, community and university resources, and also activities that they can be involved in because they can feel like they're part of the community, that they're not just by themselves online. And again, you can create your own acronym based on your experiences and your research. Um, think about your framework, so that you can use it, have it in the back of your mind as you're teaching. Like these are some tools that I'm using to help students build their psychological capital to complete the course and beyond. And if you want a copy of my chapter, you can email me. Um, if not, that's fine as well. But it's a lot of the same stuff that I've presented today. So yeah, Bob, any questions or anything else you want to add?
Well, I mean, if I were, still working and if I were teaching, I'd certainly want to carefully keep in mind, what you've talked about. It's, I've seen so many instructors, either as a student or as staff, helping them, um, where they have no connection with the students. Uh, you could just play a tape recorder and listen
Phone
to
it
the
in, right?
lecture. Yeah, literally phoning in. Yeah, I actually one time saw an instructor class session every time was him reading from the textbook. And I know the students are sitting there wondering, man, I'm paying for this. I couldn't read the book. You know, it's,
Or like YouTube videos without any response options, you got to have some activity to go with any resource that
yeah,
you have. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, like I said, students learn in different ways. And faculty, needs to recognize that as well and not worry about whether they show up in class or, it looks like they're doing something else as long as they're not disruptive. Who cares? You know? Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Yeah,
Yeah, I taught once
not
a
enough really
lower
pay
level.
attention to this.
Yeah, taught a lower level writing class, and man, the attendance was just by the end was just not so great because I think a lot of the students just maybe bombed whatever placement test there was, and but actually knew the material and just they could do it without the class, a lot of them, because they just maybe had a stressful test day. And so anytime a student doesn't show up, it's good to think about those things and not take it personally. And if something doesn't work in your class, maybe they're still reading it. I have different things where students reply to it in some classes, in some classes they don't, but maybe they're still reading it. They just choose to reply to other things.
Yeah, and you know, that's the only time you want to. I think you would require students to be in class as if you're doing things requiring participation by the students, and you want everyone to participate because that's part of their learning. But if all you're expecting is them to come to class, take notes, and go home, it's requiring that. them to do that makes no sense. Anyway,
Yeah. It can be a learning tool as well to require some things, just, but I don't feel like, I don't know. I think some people feel like it's their job to completely like raise the student as a whole individual adult, and that's not really our job. I mean, we're there to help them in academic and supportive ways like psychological support, but we're not there to change their entire belief system or entire approach to life. We just are usually we don't have that much power as some people
yeah.
think we do.
Well, that's all I got.
That's fine. Yeah, I wasn't sure on the time, so oh good. I didn't go over.
Yeah,
That's
it's
why it's kind of
like
speeding at the
perfect
end.
timing, actually. So
Because
I,
again, I'm an English teacher. I have all these slides, way too many
eh,
slides.
eh, I appreciate you doing this just for me at this point. It would be useful to others. And
Yeah,
I said
maybe we'll
earlier,
get some in the recording, the video recording
yeah,
later on.
absolutely, they will. I was when I checked a couple weeks ago, I was surprised how many people had looked at pretty much every recordings. At least somebody had looked at it, if not four or five people. So I
Good.
I appreciate it. I appreciate your time.
Well, and less anxiety when there's only one person, in the presentation. You don't
Well,
have a whole group of eyes looking at you.
hey, wouldn't it be great just to teach a class of one person? I mean,
Yeah.
talk.
Well, my first job in education was a special ed assistant. So I basically had one student that I was following around. So that was pretty easy in comparison to a, full class. So
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop the recording.